ready to build resiliency, create a healthy lifestyle, and overcome adversity with a warrior mindset. This is Define the Fight with Mariah Prussia.
Hey everybody, welcome on this Monday morning. We have a powerhouse, a blonde bombshell. I mean, the list, when you listen to her accolades, you talk about somebody defining her fight. Man, she has made a huge climb on the mountain and continues to climb. But you know what? She also continues to fly. So you may know Stephanie Goetz as the former local news here in the Red River Valley. She's coming a long way since she anchored and reported the news at WDAY, Valley News Live TV. Stephanie is an award-winning former news and sports anchor at NBC, CBS, and ABC. She's a businesswoman, executive communication leadership coach, philanthropist, professional singer, TEDx speaker, and professional pilot. She flies for the world's largest, most prestigious private jet company, and she's a coach, mentor to the top CEOs and executives at Fortune 500 companies. And you know what? She flies the skies for work and for fun, and on the ground, she guides leaders and professionals on their personal development journeys, helping them to discover their full potential and shatter their own glass ceiling while achieving their goals. Wow. I mean, talk about taking a deep breath there. Stephanie, welcome so much to Define the Fight.
Thank you so much for having me on, Mariah. It's so great to see you again.
You as well. I mean, I don't even remember the last time that I saw you. When did you end up leaving the Fargo area?
So I left broadcast in 2016 after 10 years in Fargo and Grand Forks, and then started my executive coaching business then. And I had lived in Fargo for about 6 months or a year after that, but then moved to Minneapolis and now live in Vegas, but definitely fly and spend time all over the world.
You know, I don't know how you keep your schedule straight, from flying to singing to speaking. You know, it's a lot to balance. So, you know, I want to shift from what you're currently doing now to how you got to where you are, because a lot of people will look at, okay, we look at somebody on this tier or this unreachable, you know, pillar that they're on. But what they don't recognize is the grind and the steps that are required to take to get there. So let's take it from where you are now and actually start from the very beginning, Stephanie. You know, tell us more about how you recognized the climb, because I know you have faced adversity throughout your life.
Definitely. What I always want to make clear to people is that I am nothing particularly special. I just work hard, have a positive attitude, and keep really great people around me. Because when I was young, even my mom would say, well, she's great, but there's nothing particularly exceptional about this young woman. Meaning I got, you know, A's and B's and maybe even some C's in high school. I went to college, did fine there, but it was nothing incredibly outstanding. What was interesting is that once I got into broadcast, that's where it really started to accelerate, because as a news anchor and as a reporter, you have to be really resourceful to be able to get the stories, to be able to touch lives, to be able to tell the accurate story, and also to be able to get it out in a timely fashion. And so as a news anchor and reporter, it really taught me very, very quickly how to prioritize my time, how to be pleasantly persistent with people when I needed to connect with them about a story or get information, and also dealing with adversity. You're in the public eye and you're getting to, you know, put your creativity out there. And all of that comes with definitely building your own resilience throughout that. And so the biggest thing too is that any opportunity that comes my way, instead of saying, oh no, I'm not good enough, I can't do that, I'm not qualified for that, I say, well, why don't I try it out? So being a pilot was never something that was on my radar. I had no idea that I could be a pilot, and no one in my immediate family or really friends were pilots. So for me, it was something that I had done stories on, but I never counted myself in. And particularly because I wasn't really big into STEM or math and science, I thought that I couldn't do that. But once I got a call out of the blue back in 2014 from aviation legend Victor Gelking. He said you should do a story on becoming a pilot, and I said, well, that'd be fun. I'm always looking for a story. Why not? So I went to his hangar, and he's like, well, you're going to be flying the plane, and I'm like, wait, what? I'm flying? And he said, yep. So he put me in the left seat of the Piper Archer that we were going to fly, and told me how to take off and how to use the power and pitch and attitude and all of that. And I remember pulling back the controls for the first time. And I thought, where has this been my whole life? This is incredible. And I want so much more of this. How do I do this more? So I was hooked immediately. And then very soon after, about within a week or two, I met a gentleman who had his own airplane. I start hanging out with him. I'm able to fly with him occasionally. We start dating, and now he's my husband. And he has gotten me through, as a flight instructor, he's taught me through, most of my primary ratings, and even a type rating or two. And so I was able to jump in and go very, very quickly. The biggest thing is that I seized the opportunity. When someone said, why don't you try this? Even though that little voice was saying, oh, well, you're not particularly skilled in this area and you know nothing about it. I said, well, why don't I try it out? No one's born knowing physics. It's all learned, or anything for that matter. And so I was willing to learn, and here I am today.
Well, you look at the fact that you were there to pitch a story, and little did you know that it was going to become your story. Like literally turn into your story. So I think it's awesome that you're seizing the opportunity, but there's something to be said where you get to a certain point on your growth, or that ladder, right? And I speak about this a lot, about the rungs. We climb the rung. Sometimes what we need to do is stop on that rung and look left and look right, but recognize that there's another rung to climb. And individuals who are extremely driven, that have a growth mindset, are always looking for more, which can be a blessing and a curse at the same point. But the reality is, if, like you said, if you don't seize the opportunity, you're going to sit back and wonder what if. And clearly you're not doing that in your life. You're like what's next? So you've done pretty much anything and everything for the most part, on top of singing. Okay, so I would have never thought, looking at news anchor, pilot, and then I'm reading, I'm like, you're a professional singer? What's going on? So that's great. So how did you shift? Did you sing before becoming a pilot?
Yeah, so that is one thing I think I was practically born doing, with singing. So growing up, my mom, she actually was a singer many years ago and had traveled around the United States with a singing group when she was younger. My dad sang and also plays the piano very well. So music was in our family. And so growing up, I think my earliest memories were singing in our church and singing in school and everything. So it was really something that was definitely a part of me and nurtured at an early age. And I think that that's a message for parents, that if they have a child that is interested in something, nurture it early on, because that's when they learn very quickly. And I feel like sometimes learning can be a little bit easier for children than it can as we become adults, but we can certainly still learn as adults. It's just that we have a lot more on our plate and a lot more to juggle. And at that young age, you get to learn. So for me, it was something that it was ingrained in me at a young age. And so I had been singing so much of my life that I finally pursued it in my 30s. So growing up, all I wanted to be was two things: either a professional tennis player or a professional singer or actress. And so I've been playing tennis my whole life. It's something that's very near and dear to me, and it's great exercise and it's super fun. But singing was also something to me that just has been a part of me, but I also nurtured it a lot. I sang an immense amount, took lessons. I occasionally sang in Fargo and then out in Seattle and then in Las Vegas. So the biggest thing is that I know that I love doing this, but it is going to take some work to get to where I want to be. So even if you have a hobby or a love of something, it doesn't mean that it's not actually tough sometimes to break through into a certain industry or get your feet off the ground and get going with something. Because as I started singing here in Las Vegas, it was a big grind. It was an uplift. I really had to work very hard to connect with people, to find different venues to sing at, to get my whole team around me of musicians and songs to be successful for a gig. So it was definitely a ton of work, but I think I like doing that, and I love the hard work, because ultimately my soul is so happy, and there's so much joy when I sing.
What are some of the challenges that you have found while shifting and growing throughout life?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges are that, first of all, you're going to face adversity a little bit here and there, or a lot over time, and that it's a given that that will happen, and how we respond to that and how we decide to choose to move through that or bristle against it, that's our choice. So for those who are not aviators or pilots, as we go through training, it's a constant drinking through the fire hose, because you're learning something new, you're doing different maneuvers, you're learning different concepts, and you're having to constantly put yourself in a state of learning, and also of what some people would call failure. Because if you're doing something, let's say you're doing a flight maneuver that you're just learning, the first time is probably not going to be great, maybe not the second or even the third time. And so you become really adept at stumbling and then getting back up. So what flying has taught me, amongst many things, is that there is no such thing as failure unless you never get back up again. And you can always have the opportunity, if you choose to step back up, or if you choose to say, actually, that was a really good lesson. And our lessons that we learn are often those that are the hardest lessons of a kind of a failure, or something that that we remember in that regard. So that's the biggest thing for me, is having a growth mindset of saying, interesting, I don't know this right now, but I will learn the ways to know how to do it better, and constantly apply myself. The other piece of it is that you do have to have a mindset, which I know a lot of people talk about this, and Mariah, you talk about it a lot, is that you do have to have a mindset that is a belief that you are able to do this. And some of that might have to look back on your previous successes of saying, if I have achieved this 5 years ago or 5 days ago, of course I can apply myself and achieve this. The great quote by Henry Ford saying, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. It is quite true. What I found as I got into aviation, something that I had no idea I'd be a part of and was so foreign to me, was that as I got into it, I learned to also bring a squad around me, or a posse of people that was smarter than me, that was more accomplished than me, and that was better than me, so I could learn from them. I've always believed that if you are the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room if you want to be successful, because you do want to surround yourself with exceptional people that have done things better and greater than you, because then you take that on and you learn from them. The other piece of that is that a really great quote by Elizabeth Gilbert, the famous writer. She said, she, even in all of her huge accomplishments as a writer, she still has fear when it comes to putting creativity out into the world and writing her books. And I think anyone on the outside would say, I can't believe that. This is like, she seems like she would that this would be easy for her, and that, she wouldn't have any sort of fear or doubt. And that's not the case. People who are very successful, even some of the top athletes and leaders in the world, still face this, including myself. And so what she talks about in her writing is that she doesn't let fear drive. Now, fear can come along in the car with her. It can sit, it can even roll down the window or change the radio station, but she's not letting it drive. And so that's very true as well. I know in many aspects of my learning and growing is that I may say and not believe that I can do something that looks too hard to do that maneuver, or that looks too hard to take on that big challenge. But instead I say, that's interesting, fear. You can step aside for a second. I'm still going to move forward. And there will be moments of doubt. There will be moments where you feel you can't achieve it. But what I do is I always go back to, well, I have accomplished this before and I've put in that time. So now I will still be able to do this with this same formula as I go forward. And even if I don't believe that, I make sure that I have people around me who are telling me, of course you can, because they can see me sometimes clearer than I can see myself.
Well, and with fear, is it actually fear or is it adrenaline, right? So it's being able to define those things too. So when you're looking at being at a pilot, right? how many times have they put you in different like high stress situations or scenarios? Because I'm assuming in your guys' training, you have to go through different situations that may or may not occur so that you're able to successfully land. And I know that can be scary, but until you actually face the fear or look at it, like this is a possibility. And I talk to people too when it's fear. Write down what is the worst possible thing that could happen in this scenario. What is the worst? And once you write that down and you're able to recognize it, now you can work through solutions for it if you ever have to face it. And now you're releasing some of that. So for you, when you're looking at getting in the driver's seat or getting ready to fly, what are some of the things or adrenaline or areas of awareness that they have put you in to prepare for potential high stress situations?
Yep, absolutely. So I feel very fortunate that I've always kind of plowed forward with this sense of excitement and adventure around aviation, even in situations where they could be fearful. I've always just jumped straight in with the excitement, the adrenaline, and also knowing the training and feeling confident in that. And so you're exactly right. What we do in aviation is that we put ourselves in a safe but emergency situation, whether it be in a flight simulator or with a flight instructor, where they are skilled and trained at knowing how to get out of a situation if we had to be put into an abnormal emergency situation in the air. And so we're facing fear every day. So we are facing these concerning situations in training, mostly every time that we're training. So for example, I just got done with training on the Bombardier Global 6000, which is one of the longest range and most beautiful business jets in the world. And in the simulator, we do everything that could possibly happen so that if it happens in real life, we are prepared. And so we're not afraid. Instead, we go back to our training and we say, all right, input this, input this, input this, and there will be success. Things like a V1 cut, which is an engine failure right before you rotate to take off. In the worst possible scenario, we learn how to do that and fly it multiple times over and over and over in the simulator so that we would feel confident, God forbid, it would happen in real life. Or things like a rapid decompression, where we have to put our masks, oxygen masks on, and rapidly descend down to a safe altitude. Or IFR conditions, where you are just flying in the clouds and you have to depend fully on your instruments. So it really is a metaphor for life, is that the more that we face our fears, or as in your case, as you said, of writing down the worst case scenario, we don't need to go there and necessarily dwell on that or think that that's going to happen, but instead be prepared that if that does happen, we actually have the strength and fortitude, much more than we realize, to get through that. And especially in aviation, as we train for it, and as you, when you were fighting, when you train for any possible scenario that your opponent can come at you with, then you are far more equipped to be able to handle it and more at ease and more at peace. And actually in those scenarios, you can be quite calm.
100%. You know, if you just want to sit on the couch and live life in a bubble, the reality is you're not going to go anywhere, and then the couch is eventually going to sink in. So when it comes to life, it's making sure that you are doing everything possible to put yourself in uncomfortable situations, clearly safe situations, but so that you are growing, and then that fear starts subsiding, and you're providing, like you had mentioned, you're building your toolbox because you're actually taking them out of the toolbox and utilizing them. And that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day, is how can you prepare yourself mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally throughout the day, whether it's personally, whether it's professionally, or whatever that may or may not look like. So how did the death of your brothers, Stephanie, really impact your life?
Yeah, it impacted me massively. Like anyone who has gone through any sort of loss of loved ones, it is almost unfathomable, and it is something that is very challenging. So growing up, I had two older brothers, and we had an amazing family living in Minnesota. And my two older brothers were like my protectors, and they were my best buddies, and both athletes, and we all, had a good time together, and they always razzed me and stuff too and teased me. But When I was 12 years old, my oldest brother, Brandon, died in a car accident suddenly. And then 5 years later, my brother, Cam, who was this star athlete in college and the guy that every guy wanted to be and every girl wanted to date, he was struggling with depression, and he took his life at 19. So before I was even out of high school, I had lost two of my closest family members. And then within a 5-year time span, we lost 3 other very close family members. So it was an incredibly challenging time. And for me, it was, I didn't know if this was something that was, is this just what happens? Because it seems to be happening quite often and back to back to back going on in my life. And then at that point, I don't have any more siblings. It's just me and my amazing parents who still live in Minnesota, and of course extended family. But my protectors and my brothers were gone suddenly in an instant. What is interesting about grief, as many people who've gone through it will understand, is that it is a journey like nothing else. It's not linear. It is very organic, because there are days where you will be happy and elated, and then there are days where you will be quite low and wondering if the fog will lift. What I found is that little by little over time, grief is like a big bag of rocks. At first, it is so big, it's like a boulder. It's impossible to move. It is so heavy. You can't move it, and you feel like it won't get any smaller. But as time goes on, and as you choose to get in the grime and the gook and to face it, that rock gets smaller. And at some point, it becomes a couple few rocks that you can put on your back and you can carry it around. And it might be a little heavy, but not nearly as much. And over time, it ends up being something you can easily carry with you. And even at some point, it's something you can leave on the shelf at home or somewhere else, that it becomes something so light that it's gone from its heaviness, but it can still affect you, but just not in that heavy way. What I certainly discovered over the years that I at first didn't realize I was doing, but now I know it more consciously, is that when you face your trauma and when you face the things that impact you, you will become a much lighter and brighter person. There's so many people that walk around in this world that just have traumas or even little things that became big things that they never faced, that they're still dealing with today. And the way they respond to someone, the way that they criticize someone, the way that they might make a nasty comment, all comes from often their trauma response of something that they were hurt on younger or at some point in their life that they have chosen not to move through. And so as I've gone through my struggles with the loss of my brothers, I remember in the first year after, so it did feel like a fog. Like it felt like, when will this lift? Because the grief, the sadness, the confusion, all of that just felt so strong. But after I actually faced it and chose to get uncomfortable for temporarily so I could then move through, that was really the biggest game changer for me. What's so interesting is that loss and grief can actually be a blessing in disguise, because at an early age, I learned that something can be taken from you so quickly. And so you better not get too high on your horse. Always having that humility, knowing that we are very lucky to have anything that we have. I'm very fortunate and grateful to have the great people around me, to have the opportunities to get uncomfortable, to try new things. I'm very lucky to be able to do that instead of, oh, I have to do that. Also, I was just grateful for a roof over my head and to have loved ones around me, knowing that they could be taken away so quickly. And so that has carried through with me through all of my journeys, and definitely to this day, of that humility, but also confidence and appreciation for what I have. But ultimately, for anyone who's going through any struggle right now, I really would encourage you to take this step to face it, because you will be incredibly impressed at what will happen after that. It's like the fog lifts and all of a sudden you see things in bright technicolor, because you did take the time to do the work to move through that.
100%. And you brought up a lot of great points in regards to humility and not taking things for granted. My question is, with losing so many people that were close to you at a young age, Did you have a fear of loss or a fear of getting too close to people because of the loss of your brothers and other people that were close to you?
There was that at first. Absolutely. There was a lot of frustration around that. Why me? This is so unfair. We are a faith-based family. We pay our taxes. We are good individuals. Like, we're doing all the things. Shouldn't we also then in return have a good life? And that's not always the case. And so, yeah, there was this in the immediate time frame afterwards. I was very afraid of losing people again. But what I've found is that that's not going to help me heal if I pull back from people. If I pull away, I'm going to even be more isolated and more alone. And so I'm not sure if this was just something I naturally did, or if this was God really supporting me through this, or those around me. But I chose to instead believe that this was such an anomaly, that how could this possibly happen so quickly again, that I want to choose to love with even a paper thin heart, to know that although I need to have boundaries around me, if someone's going to actually, emotionally be, hurt me or something like that, you do have to put up boundaries if there are people that are not good to you emotionally or even physically, of course. But what I found is that I lived by this mantra of the old adage of, it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all, because my life is so much richer and on so many levels, because I have chosen to continue to love, and also to know that all of those, the more people that you do have in your life and that are supporting you and that you choose to love and let them love you in return, is that you actually have more of a support network beyond that. What you do have to face, though, is that there are going to be times, there's going to be twinges of that loss could come back in. And even to this day, 20 some years later after these losses, of course, there's still pieces of tentacles of grief that can come in, that there will be a fear of losing close family members, or even just losing opportunities or physical things that are very important. And I always have to go to a place where I have to step forward in that and say, okay, but what's the reality here? And even if worst case scenario happened, I have the tools and people around me, and I will even find the tools to successfully get through this with joy and happiness, while also grieving. Because as a great mentor once told me, you are an ampersand, you are an and. We can be happy and sorrow filled. We can be grieving and filled with joy and hope for what's to come. And knowing that is really key.
You mentioned tools again, and I love the fact that you keep mentioning tools, because it's really what it is. It's like you need to have different things to go through. So for you, knowing that you have a full schedule, and clearly you grabbed tools when you were younger that you brought with you to current day and age, what are some of the tools that you use to help manage your mental health when you're looking at time restraints, when you're looking at have to be here, flying, when things might go awry or not? What are those things that you bring into your life to maintain that balance and that peace?
One of the biggest things that I've found is that we have a plate in life of time and responsibilities that can only be filled with so much stuff. As another great quote that I've lived by over the years is that you can have everything, just not all at once. So when I was starting to get into aviation and I had a full book of clients for coaching, I can't have both at the same time unless I don't sleep, and that's not going to help. So you have to take something off of your plate to be able to make room for the thing that you want to invest in. So when people say, I want to be able to face the trauma that I've gone through, I actually want to be able to move through things and heal. Well, you have to take time for that then. It's not like you can just have everything that you're doing and then do that on top of that. You can certainly cut back on a few things in certain areas to make room for that. So what you prioritize will be what succeeds and what dominates in your life. And so for me, it was realizing, okay, I have to pull back on some of my client work, and that will also pull back somewhat financially, but I'm willing to make that sacrifice because the lighthouse at the end is at the light at the end of the tunnel essentially is greater because I will have my pilot's license. I'll have that joy. I'll have that goal that I now want to achieve. And, now I can put things back on the plate after I've finished a lot of that training, and I certainly have. But that was a big piece of it. Another is that realizing that a lot of times how we see ourselves and what we think about a situation is often way more fearful than it actually is. And it's not even close to reality. So I do a lot of reality check on how I'm seeing things to say, all right, if I'm worried about this certain situation, is maybe I can take a step back and say, that is the likelihood of that happening is probably not. And actually, why don't I go to best case scenario? So I start training myself to say, you know what, the best case scenario or a great case scenario, how about that happening? Because 9 times out of 10, it does. Then if something does happen that is more challenging, what's been fascinating, like utterly fascinating, is that the world, the universe, and God really is working things out for our good, even in more challenging times. I can tell you time and time and time again where I have been either like slowed down because of traffic and I didn't get somewhere on time, but it ended up being such a blessing because I ran into someone who now is a major client of mine. And if I hadn't been slowed down by that traffic, I would not have met that individual. So I try not to push myself so fast and so hard because I generally do. And I try to say, this is going to be working out for my good no matter what. And there's going to be a plan B, a plan C, or a plan D in the universe in this certain scenario that I might just have to look for it, but I will be able to move forward even with plan D, E, or F.
100%. You know, it's looking at things from pace. You're mentoring CEOs and executives. So working with Fortune 500 companies, how did that come into play, and what can people expect when they're working with you?
It came into play as I was going through broadcast and really loved my time there. A decade as a newscaster was an amazing time, and I loved all of my time in Fargo and Grand Forks and that whole region. And at one point, I was ready to fly on to another career. And that came about when I realized that I had something with my own experience in communicating and with presence and being on and telling a story, and that the corporate world could really use that. So now I coach executives at Fortune 500 companies all across the world. And I'm so blessed that it's taken me to, multiple different countries all across the world and working with clients everywhere. So what I do with clients now is that I help them break through any of their barriers when it comes to just professionally around communication and around leadership and overall presence and in delivering great media interviews. And how I work with them is it's often one-on-one, but it can be one-to-many as well, workshops or keynotes. And I'm helping them understand how to be great communicators. How do you develop a story? How do you be captivating and change things up to make it really gripping? But how do you connect with people on a deeper level? And although the beginning of what I did was mostly around specifically communication coaching, this also is a massive pillar in one's leadership. And so it becomes communication and leadership coaching, because a lot of it also is around developing their mindset. What is the root around why they are not doing so well with their communication and getting their message across? What are some barriers that they have around imposter syndrome? Even as CEOs and top leaders, they experience doubt as well. And so I work with them on how to redefine that narrative that they have with themselves, and also developing that team around them. So I love it. My mom is a teacher. She was a longtime LD and EBD and 5th grade teacher for, like 3 decades, I believe. And she always told me, she said, You should be a teacher. We have summers off. You get to work with students. It's an amazing opportunity, an amazing time. And I said, well, maybe. And then I went in the career of broadcast. And it's funny because now I'm like, Mom, I am a teacher. I'm a flight instructor, and I'm also a coach and mentor, and I'm teaching people all the time. So what she believed was going to happen ultimately did. It was just in a little different way, and I absolutely love it.
You look at the things like when you're a little kid, you said you wanted to be a professional tennis player, right? Singer, so on and so forth. And a lot of those different things came into play, right? Maybe not tennis. Maybe it's just shifting where you're doing it for fun, clearly. But at the same point, It's like we have to look at that self-reflection of those different pieces may or may not occur, but there's parts of them sprinkled into different areas of where our journey actually takes us. And clearly that's happened with you. So for individuals who want to learn more or connect with you, Stephanie, how can they get in touch with you when you're looking at website, so on and so forth? Because I know in our area, we have a lot of entrepreneurs and then individuals outside of this area that will be listening too. It's looking for that diamond in the rough that can really help them grow. And I know I've looked at different individuals on, okay, hey, I'd love to have this type of trainer or this type of leader, because the reality is I think we all need an individual who can train us to become more is really what it comes down to. So I think everybody needs a coach. So how can they find you, Stephanie?
Yep. They can, a couple of ways. You can certainly find me on my website. It's just Goetzcom with 2Ms.com. So GOETZCOMM.com. You can Google it as well. Stephanie Goetz Communications. That's the company. You can also follow me and connect with me on LinkedIn, just under Stephanie Goetz, and Instagram is probably the best. So it's Jet Girl Stephanie is my name and handle there. And that's really a great way to connect with me. What I try to do is I try to get to all the messages I can. If it's buried deep in the hidden messages, my apologies, I'll try to get to it. Just keep reaching out. But another point that I wanted to make, as you were just saying about how people view their lives, is that one of the biggest game changers for me was also early on when I had that reality check of loss very early in my life, of that anything can happen. I started seeing life differently, that I was not so set on an exact path of how my life would go, because I realized it could get shattered at any moment, but it could be also a blessing in disguise. And so for those out there who are wanting to make a change or transform, I didn't get my pilot's license till my mid-30s, and it's a third career, and you can absolutely do that. You also have to have the mindset of realizing that don't be so stuck on how you think your life is going to go, because then you're also narrowing it, because it could be 10 times more magnificent than that. And you're not allowing that opportunity to come in if you just say, my life is going to be exactly like this. So be willing to actually shed what you think your life is going to look like exactly, and be open for new opportunities or things that might come into your life that actually put you in a completely different direction, because that might take it in this magnificent place that you had no idea, and it might be your greatest joy.
That's beautiful. Well, Stephanie, I want to thank you so much for everything that you do and for coming on the show today. You definitely lead by example, and we need more positive lights within the community and within the world. So again, thank you for making the time to be on the show. And for individuals too that are looking to help youth mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, check out definethefight.org, where, you know what, our future leaders are our children. And if we are not taking them and putting them underneath our arms and helping them lead, become good leaders, but then provide coping skills and areas for growth, that's really what it's all about. So together we can define the fight. And I look forward to seeing you next week on Monday.